There are a lot of frustrating things um, that come along with the job of parenting. Um, there are a lot of things as a parent you question yourself for, both in real time and, of course, even more often in retrospect. But in all the things that you could ever and will ever possibly question yourself for as a parent, there's a difference between knowing when you should be held accountable and hold yourself accountable for the job you've done of raising your children as a parent, and knowing when you're not accountable and when you should not hold yourself accountable. And it all comes down to the job that you do as far as you see as being important in preparing your children for the life ahead of them, for what's out in the real world when they finally become of age, of sound, mental capacity to go out into the real world. It's not always about age, because the law says that at 18 you're an adult, but you're not really a grown up, and you're not really an adult until you have some life experiences, until you have responsibilities, and until you're in a full position of knowing what accountability really means. And medically, we know that our brains are still developing, you know, until we're 26 years old. Specifically, the frontal cortex, which controls things like judgment, which controls things like impulse. So you can raise your children in the best way possible, set up for them the best examples. But even at younger ages, and even before and during and past adolescence and into their teenage years, once they leave that house and they interact with their peers at school and their friends on the playground or walking to and from school, there are going to be different influences that are going to come into play. And of course, that makes your job more difficult. And of course, there are different aspects of being a parent that you have to employ in the way of tools that you want to utilize to keep bridging the gap whenever influences beyond your control make it to your children. But if you feel that you're doing the best job you can as a parent, you feel that you have done the best job you could do as a parent once your children are ready to go out into the real world, you have to know at that point that you have to, of course, your job as a parent is always to continue to be there for your children, to protect them and to provide that love and support. But if you know that you've done the things that you've needed to do, and you know that you've done things right by your children, and right doesn't mean in a perfect way, because there's no perfect guide. That's an open-ended mold that you continue to play with, you continue to sculpt, and you continue to customize throughout your parenting. But whatever style of parent you category you fit into, whatever parenting approach you take, if you can look back and say, I honestly did everything that I could with the information that was provided to me at the time, and I approached parenting with love and with foresight and intuition and all these different things that you do need to employ as a parent, then at that point, if your children turn out to be bad, or if your children turn out to not be the most productive members of society, or they turn out to not be the most law abiding members of society, you have to be strong enough to understand this is not my fault. Because unfortunately, there are many different types of people in the world. Everybody won't be good, everybody won't be bad. Most people will fall somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. And I come across a lot of parents. I have discussions with a lot of parents who do naturally take on that blame, or in some way feel within themselves that they must have done something wrong. And that's a natural feeling. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong to feel like, damn, I must have made a mistake somewhere. And maybe you did, because we all make mistakes along the way when it comes to parenting, because the problem with, see, most things in life that you can prepare for, um, if you know what exactly is needed, and there's a clear line of pass or fail, right? Succeed or not succeed, then you kind of know what you need to do to hit that mark. And that is usually instantly gratifying to you in a sense that you typically will know right away or shortly thereafter, but usually in real time, what your performance yielded. When it comes to being a parent, sometimes it takes years and decades for you to really see the product of the work that you put in the job that you did as a parent. And so that's why you have to trust yourself. The way that I approached my job as a parent and raising my children is however they turn out at the end, I will 100% and with a clear conscience be able to sit back and say, you know what, this is how they turned out, good or bad, right, wrong, or indifferent. But I did a good job and I did the best that I could. And that's all you could ever hope for. Because even if you have multiple children, you may have some children who turn out to be superstars in life. And you may have some children who turn out to just live a mediocre life by whatever standards people use to classify such things. And then you may have a child in that group or a couple of children in that group who, are just the worst among society. You will find all different types of people in society who don't belong in society. Murderers, rapists, terrorists. They don't all come from bad homes. They don't all come from homes where they were abused or they didn't have parents or a support system who cared for them, people who cared for them. Some do, of course, but not all of them. And those parents who naturally feel bad because they brought those children into the world, they cultivated those children and raised those children. So naturally, you're going to feel like you felt somewhere. But you have to, at some point, understand that our children are going to become the people that they become based on the decisions that they make. All you can do as a parent, all any of us can do as a parent, all I can do as a parent, and all I'm responsible for doing as a parent is trying to provide my children with the lessons and with the knowledge and the insight and with the tools that will make it more likely for them to live a productive life, to be good people, to be viewed as good people in the world, and to be successful in whatever way they define success. But all of those tools are not going to be perfect tools. All of those tools are not going to yield necessarily the results or the outcomes that I may see as far as my vision for my children right now, with my children being 7, 9, and 12. I won't know what the true results of that are until later on. Of course, you see different signs, every day and as they get older over time. But ultimately, it's still going to be up to them. And ultimately, it's the influences that they choose to hold on to. It's the interactions that they have with the people that they encounter outside of my presence and outside of the controlled environment that I set for them as a father. Now, of course, it's my job to make sure as much as possible that they use my guidance and that they use the guidance of their mom to make the best decisions. But no child is ever going to always 100% of the time make the best decisions. Because at the end of the day, I didn't come from a terribly bad upbringing. I have some things about my upbringing that I don't agree with. I have some things about my upbringing that I wish were different. And that can be said about every single one of us walking the face of this earth. But I was privileged in a lot of ways that a lot of the peers I grew up with were not. I come from a two-parent household where, in my generation, was very rare. And I was one of the few of all of my peers who I grew up with, spent time with, hung out with, and considered friends. I was one of the few out of all of them, one of the very few who was privileged enough to grow up in a two-parent household. And then there's other things, of course, that come into play when it comes to that. But ultimately, whatever pitfalls, whatever bad decisions I made, whatever consequences from those bad decisions might have derailed certain things in my life at different points in time in my life, ultimately, those things were my decision. Those things have nothing to do with my parents. Now, that's not to say that we as adults don't come into our adulthood with certain baggage because of the relationships that we had with our parents and the different interactions that we had with them and our siblings and whatever other family members played a part in rearing us and our upbringing. But ultimately, it is up to you to choose to continue to perpetuate a cycle or to break a cycle. I talk about it all the time with my inner circle. I talk about it often on this platform. The best you can ever do as a parent is to care, is to be open minded, is to have an open door policy, is to be reasonable, is to be logical, and to not be so far removed from your days of your childhood and your youth that you just completely don't get it when it comes to what your kids are going to go through. And as long as you understand that they are people too, and as long as you understand that they are going to have views and opinions on how they should move, and as long as you know how to approach that with the balance of getting them to understand your views and how you feel as a human being, and yes, you do have feelings as well, but also consider that I have the life experience and that I've made some of the same choices that you're considering making or that you will make. And I've seen what those bad decisions, what those mistakes, what those poor choices can cause to happen to you as you travel down your path. As long as you follow those few things, and none of them are simple things to follow, but as long as you follow a similar approach, at the end of the day, you should be at peace with washing your hands of any situation that somebody may from the outside looking in think is your fault. Or, because we live in a society now where every time something happens, people want to say blame the parents. And to a certain extent, that's true. But in reference to those parents who didn't take that time, but in reference to those parents who weren't there to see the things that they needed to do and chose not to intervene for whatever reason. There are a lot of things that you can have issue with your upbringing looking back. And people are always going to have opinions on why a person's upbringing was the way it was. And you can talk to a parent in your late 20s, 30s, or 40s, and they can have their reasons or what you perceive to be excuses for why certain things weren't done. But at the end of the day, your number one responsibility to yourself as a parent is to understand that whatever you lacked growing up, whatever you were not given growing up, whatever your parents or lack of parenting or lack of the even presence of parents caused you to fall short in life when it came to your job as a parent, you need to understand and hold yourself accountable for the fact that your children are not responsible for that. And although you would like them to understand that as adults, they don't have to, because no child ever asked to be here. The parents make the decision to bring children into this world. So whatever hangups you have, whatever issues you have to somehow figure out a way to deal with those issues so that you can be the best parent you need to be for your child, so that they can be the best person that they can be throughout their lives. I don't pretend to know everything. I just know what I know. Let me know what y'all think about this one. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace and love.